Have you ever experienced a traumatic, life-altering event that you just cannot seem to heal from? Whether it's something long ago that you've mostly overcome but may still affect you, or something more recent that ripped the rug out from under you, today's episode is all about letting go and freeing your soul. After tragically losing her 19-year-old son to suicide, today's guest was called from the depths of her grief journey to help others heal and recover from life-shattering events. Want to hear how she has coped with her loss and worked through prior traumas in ways that you can too? Come on in. Welcome to Transforming Millions, where women leaders get real about what it really takes to make world-changing impact without life-sucking consequences. With us today is an incredible guest and a woman I'm happy to call a friend as well as a business connection. She is a visionary guide for life-shattering events as a transformational speaker, a certified master coach and healer, and an award-winning author. Her book, Shattered Together, A Mother's Journey from Grief to Belief, is a practical guide for those struggling with loss of any kind and has become a #1 international bestseller on Amazon. After experiencing the tragic loss of her son to suicide, she uncovered a powerful sense of self and a connection to the divine that motivated her to redesign her life and help others do the same. She leads transformative retreats for leaders who have experienced loss. She's also a speaker, inspiring audiences on topics such as suicide prevention, grief, loss, and self-discovery. Welcome, Cathleen Elle. I am so happy to have you with us here today.
Thank you, Spencer. It's an honor to be here and to see you.
Yes, you as well. It's been a long time. We knew each other from a business group years ago and have crossed paths in different places. And it's been so just exciting, really, for lack of any other word there, to watch your journey along the way and watch as you've grown and your reach and your impact has grown and expanded. And so I'm so happy to be able to highlight you and the work that you're doing here today.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I know sometimes, I shouldn't say I know, but I'll just say it's been my observation that sometimes in leadership, I think we as leaders tend to think that people are expecting this professional facade and that it's all about like, oh, as a leader, you got to be professional and you can't be human. You can't let people see us as humans, which I totally do not subscribe to. But I think a lot of us kind of have that undercurrent of that. But I know that you have a very personal story. Some of it we heard even in the intro there that led you down this road. So can you share some of your journey with us and about how you got here and why you're so passionate about what you do?
Absolutely. Thanks, Spencer. My childhood wasn't a peaceful childhood. Let's just say that my birth father was an abusive alcoholic. Some people would say we lived in poverty. He actually even shot at us as a child. So I experienced verbal, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse throughout most of my early childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout some of my life, I thought that I had addressed that because I read self-help books. I really invested in me, and I continued to know inside that I didn't want to live that life. So I continued to strive to do better. So I became, I got married. I owned businesses. I was a legislator. I worked for the governor for 7 years. I became a CEO of a large commercial contractors association. So I continued to strive in my life and masking, which I didn't know, with doing. Mm-hmm. And then when I was the CEO, my son took his life. Mm-hmm. He was 19. His name is Logan. And my daughter was in college in South Carolina. I lived in Vermont. North Carolina is where she was in college. And it shattered me. I was in a board meeting and a friend came, a fellow lobbyist came to me and just said, Logan had taken his life. And my life in that split second shifted. Anything that mattered before then, well, I shouldn't say anything. Most things that I put value on and importance on didn't matter anymore. All the things we worried about, all the things that we filled our life with just dissipated. And what mattered was, how was I going to live again? And I found myself on Logan's grave about 3 months after, because I was in a fog.
Mhm.
And I was crying and screaming and just begging whoever, whatever took my son's life, take me to. I didn't want to live anymore. I was on my own in Vermont. I didn't feel like anybody understood me. I was deep in self-blame and judgment because, hey, listen, if I can represent the state of Vermont in so many ways, how could I not save my son?
Mhm.
And it was then that I felt and I heard like this whole calm like came over me. And I heard this voice say, if this happened in your life, you're meant to do something with it. Now go do it. So that's when I shifted how I was grieving, from being a victim of what was happening to putting myself out there to prevent it for everyone else. So for about a year after that, I invested in torturing myself, I will say, with interviews and fundraisers and doing all kinds of things on suicide prevention. So I became the face of suicide prevention and what to look for and what not to look for, how to address it. And finally, it just got to a space where I couldn't continue to do that. It would take me out for about a week because I was so filled with so much shame. And I started to do, of course, I worked with mediums and intuitives and energy healers, and I started to do cognitive thought therapy. So I did that for about 5 years. And what happened after that was 5 years in, I was thinking, I'm still numb, I'm still heavy. I have a good life. I got remarried. I had, I was well known in the community. We did things, but I was still numb inside. Like there was nothing left for me. And I knew that I needed to make a difference. And it was then that I realized that I had post-traumatic stress from my early childhood. And we went through this 12 to 18 week process of reshaping my thought process. And so that started to shift the way I was looking at life and how I saw life. So from there, I started to step into personal development. I became a master of healing. I went to Jack Canfield's, Train the Trainer Success Principles, where we met. And just everything shifted because I started to work with plant medicine as well. And I realized that the stories I was telling myself were the stuck emotions in my body that were wrapped around the experience itself. So the experience is not going to change. The experience was what it was. It was the emotions and the untruths that were stuck there that caused additional pain for me to continue to react from trying to be safe, to keep myself safe from what I had experienced.
Yeah.
That was a long description, but hopefully that was helpful.
Yes, gosh, there's so much there to that I'd love to just kind of circle back to and touch on in some various ways. And one of them I think at the end, as you talked about, like our survival needs and our need to be safe, I think is ultimately driving all of us. It's a huge part of what I talk about in my work as well. Like we're all basically just still looking out for saber-toothed tigers. They're just in different forms these days. And sometimes the saber-toothed tigers are in our own minds.
Most of the times they are. Most of the times it is our mind.
Exactly. I often say it like it's our ego now. It's like our physical survival isn't often at threatened anymore. I couldn't get that out. So it's not like our physical survival is usually the thing that's being threatened. It's more like our identity now is what's being threatened. But I think so much of that ties in with so much of your story as a mother. Like, where did I go wrong? What could I have done differently? You made a comment about like, I do all these things like running the state of Vermont. How could I not, have seen this coming or done anything to change it? And I think with suicide, especially, there's so much shame and guilt and what ifs involved. We had a suicide in our family as well. And it reaches every family member in different ways, of all of us just rehashing in our minds, what could we have said differently? What could we have done differently? How could we have intervened at a different point? It's constant.
Yeah, and Logan struggled most of his teen years, so obviously that caused conflict. I was working I was a single parent since they were 5 and 6 years old, so I worked several jobs. I tried, I went to every event that I could, and there was still stress on our relationship because he was doing things that wasn't in his highest and best, I thought. As a mom, we're
Right.
supposed to protect our children. We're supposed to save them, and we're supposed to,
Yeah.
provide them in the way that we think is best for them.
Yes.
And I don't blame myself anymore. I did. What I didn't say, not because I didn't want to, I just skipped over, didn't think of it, is that when Logan left his humanness, he wasn't speaking with me. And I found out a month after he had taken his life that he had written a note that included he didn't want me at his service.
Huh.
So I was shattered when the event happened. And then a month later, when I thought nothing else could be any worse, I found out that he didn't want me at his service.
Yeah.
Now, was that him? I don't believe 1 second it was really him as his soul. It wasn't him. It was the pain he was in. Today, I can say that from all the work that I have done.
Yeah.
And it's the stories we create. Again, it comes back to the stories we create. The event is the event. It's the stories that we feel that we are responsible for that causes the pain and the unnecessary suffering.
Yeah.
So today I get to look at events that happen in my life. Now, let me tell you, I'm not perfect and stuff happens.
Right.
Almost said something else, but even last a couple of weeks ago, I think it was last week or a week ago, I don't know how long ago it was, but my identity was compromised.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to be able to be in the experience of that. And it was almost like I was observing me experiencing the experience now. So now I didn't get all stressed about, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like what we do normally.
Right.
And today I was like, okay, this happened. What's my next step? Where do I go? How do I do this?
Yeah.
I even brought humor into it with some of the people I was talking to, because what
Hallelujah.
do? There's nothing else you can do. You have to deal with it.
Sometimes you just gotta laugh.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of our work is parallel in a lot of ways. And that, like, part of what you just mentioned, even about like not thinking it was really him and his spiritual self, like my the whole basis of my framework is around like who we are as spiritual beings and the inherent conflict between who we are as human beings, because spiritual beings were limitless and divine and magnificent extensions of our creator, and as humans we have this need to survive. We're breakable and bruisable, and we do have an expiration date. We don't necessarily know when that expiration date is, but we know that we all have one. So yeah.
And when we live knowing that we have an expiration date, thinking that it could be in the next second, we can live in fear, or we can be like, how can I live my life the best way that I can? How can I be the light on this earth to share, whether I'm serving someone as a client or whether I'm walking into a store and seeing a homeless guy looking at something. You could tell he was homeless. Like, this is where I love to show. He picked up something to eat. He looked at the price and put it back down. And I'm like, no, like I wanted, like, there's something that just pulled me to him. So I pulled out a $20 bill and I was like, or I can't remember what it was. I think it was a $20 bill. And then I just handed it to him, said, buy what you need to buy. Sorry. Okay. Purchase what you need to purchase, eat something. I wish you well. And that's the light that I want to show up as.
Yes.
No matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, when you first started sharing your story and you shared about the difficult childhood that you had, and how you were like just succeeding, like checking off the next rung of the ladder along the way. I suspect many in our audience can resonate with that. I feel like every client I've ever worked with, there's some version of that story that's true for a lot of us. Tell me a little about that feeling of like thinking like, I've handled this, like I'm good, I did the work, I did the self-help books, I got through, look how successful I am, and what it was like for you in that moment to be like, oh wait, there's more.
It's so interesting, and I love that we're talking to women, professional women, and because most women, like you said, are leaders, have gone through something pretty traumatic in their life. Yeah. And the reason why we strive, it's another way of masking, is that we are trying to prove to the world that we're worthy to be wherever we are. So each step that I took, I never thought that I mastered it, Spencer.
Mhm.
I thought that I was fine and I was doing well,
Right.
but I had 3 marriages, belonged to 3 different churches. I, you know, I continued no matter where I was on a professional level. It wasn't enough. I had to keep climbing the ladder.
Yeah.
And because of Logan's leaving his physical presence, I realized that I was seeking on the outside what was
Mhm.
empty on the inside. And
Absolutely.
what wasn't working, like relationship after relationship after relationship, I continued to choose people who pushed me into the ability to see where I was judging myself, where I wasn't honoring myself, where I was abusing myself. And I didn't realize that then until
Mhm.
after I really started to step into the knowing that the stories that we create, the ego, the brain is there to protect us. So I love listening to Peter Crone. I don't know if you know him, but if anybody on the show doesn't know Peter Crone, definitely listening to him because he talks about that our brain is trying to protect us from
Mhm.
fear, but the only thing that's occurred was our brain protecting us, like the stories creating the event, yet there's no event to be created, so therefore we're living in fear and
Yes.
protection from our past experiences and creating them again.
Yeah.
It's
Is that
all.
about, like, anticipating what could go wrong? Like, well, what if, or the things, is it the anticipatory fear that you're referring to more so there?
Yeah, so if you're procrastinating in your business, or
Mm.
if you're working so much that you have no personal time, there's something masking there. If you get
Right.
angry or frustrated with someone, like one of his quotes, and I might botch it, but one of his quotes is, "Life presents people and circumstances to you, so where you can see where you're limiting yourself."
Yes.
Definitely didn't say it the way he does, but
Yeah.
we're creating those limits ourselves based
Yeah.
on what's stuck inside us. It's not about blaming anybody. It's not about blaming your parents. It's not about blaming yourself. It's it's to free our soul from
Yes.
the heavy, dense energy that's stuck there, so where we can really live in the light that we actually are.
Mhm.
We're
Yeah.
here to shine our light, to free our souls. We're not here to live in suffering and pain. And the energy that's swarming around the US right now is anxiety, depression, fear,
Mm.
worry. There's all kinds of energy out there.
Mhm.
My
Blame.
daughter lives in Saint Pete, and so there's a hurricane coming through and a tornado and what have
Right.
you, and she called me up yesterday full of anxiety and crying, and I realized at that moment, because we have done our work, is that,
Yes.
Ashley, you're picking up the energy, not only your own anxious energy, but you're picking up the energy of all around you.
Yes.
So really protect, not about just create this love bubble and push it out versus taking it on. So
Yeah.
share your light versus worrying for someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think environmental design is such a key part of that too, to recognize, like you said, we're picking up on those energies that are all around us.
Mhm.
And, I think you started to use the word protect, almost like protecting yourself from it. But I think so much of it is what spaces we put ourselves in, whether it be physical spaces like where you live or where you work, the culture of the company that you run or that you work in. But also like the people you interact with, the shows you listen to, the books you read, the conversations you engage in, so much. And I think it feeds all of those, like you said, about the
It does.
stories we tell. Like an event happens and then there's a whole story around what that means or what we think it means or what good, bad, right, wrong judgment we want to put on it. And then if we surround ourselves with other people that are complaining about how awful it is and, oh, it's terrible and the world's falling apart. And I talked to my mom who watches a certain news network that I shall not name 24/7. And she's like, the world is falling apart. It's the end. It's the end. And I'm like, no, you just watch it 24/7 and they're pumping you full of it. Like it's so much about what we surround ourselves with.
And just to remind everybody, news sells when it's scary.
Yeah.
projecting fear into the universe, that's when it sells. It's
Yes.
not about informing you anymore. It's
Yeah.
about what are their ratings and how they're going to receive the money.
Yeah.
It's and from my perspective, it's just like pharmaceuticals or the healthcare
Yes.
industry. The healthcare industry isn't a healthcare industry. It actually is a sick care. Because
Yes.
really, if we think about it, if we're promoting how to be healthy, how to eat organic food, what kind of how to clean your foods so you don't put in all those toxins into your body,
Right.
know what you're eating, know who you're surrounding yourself with, exercising, meditating, like really self-care.
Mhm.
Self-care is the key to relationships, to success, to business, to anything at all.
Yeah.
Self-care is the key. Because if
Yeah.
you know yourself well enough, you're not going to project onto someone else that someone did something to you. It's
Yeah.
not about that. It's about you. It's how you're receiving it. It's not about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when we also tying in with what we both have been saying from before too about the spiritual versus the human, that when we're standing in more in that spiritual sense of self and that knowingness of who we really are and separate, not so much separate from, but just understanding that who we really are is not these breakable, threatened, needing to worry about survival beings. And when you can sort of distinguish the difference or even just notice, oh, okay, I'm back in my fear-based humanity right now. That's why I'm feeling threatened by what this person is saying to me or what I'm hearing or whatever else. Let me shift back over to the spiritual side and remember who I am and what the real reality is here.
Yeah, I had a whole master class on narcissism and leadership abilities for about a year. I invested in this a business venture, and one of the leaders, maybe three of them, um, just was stuck in her. I'm going to call it victimhood.
Yes.
I triggered her.
Mm,
And by me triggering her, she reacted to me. And so there was this dynamic that kept going on. I knew through the entire course, I say course, but it wasn't a course, it was an
right.
investment. I knew the entire year that I was meant to be there for my own personal growth.
Hmm.
And then when I knew that I'd grown enough from that experience, I said, okay, I need to take care of myself now. I'm going to step away with love and
Hmm.
and joy and saying this has been an amazing experience. I have grown so much in a year. Thank you so much. And I no longer need that energy in my environment. So I made the choice to step away with love. So
Right.
stepping away with resentment or anger, you still have your own work to do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we all still have our own work to do. No
It's
matter how much we've evolved, no matter what next level we've gotten to, there's always the next level after that. And it's funny, I was a psychology major, even though I didn't go into it as like a clinical psychologist or anything, but I recently started thinking about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, with the triangle and the survival and food and shelter at the bottom, and it moves its way up. Really, almost all of that, except for the very top level, is our human survival-based, fear-driven needs, even things as far as our identity and sense of self and accomplishments. It's really about that, like, I need to prove myself in some way or feel valued because I don't get that I am valuable on my own. But then when you work your way up into self-actualization, that has I forget the phrasing of it, but it's basically like then there's this continuous want for more, just for the limitless, like no roof on it, spiritual growth of it. And
right.
so I really feel like we all have a next level that we're growing into. And every time we grow into that next level, it's like we don't know where the saber-toothed tigers are again. And we often will go through the whole kind of thing all over again of like those knee-jerk reflex reactions that happen when we feel threatened or we're not sure what to expect.
And the more we step into it, the easier it is and less often it
Yes.
happens. And so I get excited when something does happen now, instead of being like, oh God, not again. Like, oh, what's going on? Why do I have to go through this again?
Yes.
Question the event does zero good. And
Yes.
that's why I brought up the two examples that just recently happened with me, is
Yeah.
because we're on a journey. Life is a journey.
Hmm.
To choose whether we want to suffer or not. It's really our
Yeah. Suffering is optional. I taught yoga for 15 years and I used to tell my students suffering is optional.
it is. we get to decide.
Yeah. One of the things I just wanted to touch back on, because you've mentioned it quite a few times, and I think for people that aren't used to thinking this way, they might be like, what on earth does she mean by this? Because I think sometimes people can be a little put off by some of the energy stuff. Oh, that's not scientific, that's woo-woo. And, to each their own, whatever. But one of the core tenets, I think, of your work that you've brought up a lot is about the beliefs, the stories we tell ourselves. And that's a big part of my work too. And I know sometimes people go, but I don't get it. How do you just choose a different belief? You touched on it some with like that there's so many possibilities of how we could look at something, of how we can approach it. And it's like, well, why not look at a different interpretation or a different possibility? Why is that one that you chose the truth with a capital T, and none of the other ones are even like possibilities at all?
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a little about how you help people even consider different options of ways of looking at things?
Sure. So it's all stories, right? It's all from our head. So our brain is informed by what's in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people believe our brain is what tells us about our bodies, but our bodies are informing our brain
Mm-hmm.
on how to think. So if you have experienced trauma in your life, which we all have, no matter what the trauma is, could be that you cried too long in a crib.
Mm-hmm.
There are all kinds of experiences that could be considered a trauma for a particular person.
Mm-hmm.
And so those stories, those emotions,
Mm-hmm.
are stuck in your body, which has you repeating those experiences because you're protecting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I work with clients, I have them get in touch with their body. So it's mind, body, and soul. So when our mind is telling us a story that, someone's being a jerk to me, or my boss is difficult, or my coworker is a gossiper, or whatever it is in a belief about yourself. So when we're judging someone else, we're really identifying where we're judging ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know their story. We do not know what they've been through. Oftentimes people put their mask on, like we've talked
Right.
about. Like a lot of people thought I had it together, that I was a mover and a shaker, and that I was successful.
Right.
Inside I was dying because I didn't believe that of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I repeated the marriages, the relationships, the striving.
Yeah.
And so when
we're
I'm
collecting evidence too along the way. I mean, that's part of it, is you have that belief about yourself, and therefore you're behaving in ways and creating results for things that give you evidence to say, see,
yeah,
look, there it is again.
yeah. So it's easier for me to just use one of the stories that I did when I went into one of my journeys that I've been on.
Yeah.
And when my father was shooting at us as a 3 or 4-year-old, there was a big argument before, it was yelling, fighting, pushing, and finally he says, I'm just going to get my gun and just kill you all. So my mom, myself, and my sister go into the bathroom. My mom shuts the door. She puts my sister and herself in the bathtub, and she puts me between the toilet and the wall. I was the youngest, but at the time, my 3 or 4-year-old brain created a story that I was unworthy, unlovable, and not worthy of being protected.
Mm-hmm.
I was throwawayable, basically, because
by the toilet and not behind the protection of the tub, which most likely. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, separate from my mom and my sister. So like I was separate, that I wasn't going to be protected. So I had a story created in that moment.
And I just want to clarify too, it was most likely subconscious. It's not like in your 3-year-old brain, you consciously thought, I don't matter, that kind of thing, but it's subconscious almost always for all of us.
Exactly. Thanks. Yeah. And so he went to reload his gun. We get out in the car. We're trying to drive away. He shoots at us, gets the tire, and my mom only goes a little ways up the road and stops. And as a 3 or 4-year-old, again, I'm just like, why are we stopping? Again, the story created was we're not safe. I'm not safe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not safe.
Right.
We hear the cops come. She decides to go back down to the house, which again, I was like, why are we doing this? Again, I'm just trying to, this is how your stories are created
Yes,
from a
yes.
childhood trauma. So the cop says he's going to go in and take him away. My mother's, and that's when I had like this relief, like, okay, I can breathe.
Mhm.
My mother says, no, 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 let me go and check. If he's passed out, everything will be okay. So here I am, not safe. And now the person who's shooting at us is still there. The person who is protecting us is going into a house that just had a gun shooting at us. Like, so here I'm abandoned again,
Right.
like the story I created. Now, after I went through this process through RIM and then again through ayahuasca, I was able to see more truth of that. And the truth that I was able to experience was my mom was afraid that her kids were going to be taken away. So she was more than willing to be beat on a regular basis so she could keep her kids.
Mm.
And she put me by the toilet because that was the safest place for me, because there was
Mhm.
no more room in the bathtub. So she put me over there to protect me, not to separate me.
Right.
So when you start to recreate the stories and you actually experience it through their experience,
Mhm.
and this is no blame on my dad. My dad treated me the best he could with what he had. Like how he responded to us was much better than what he experienced.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
a generational
Yeah. He was
abuse.
baby stepping it forward. It just wasn't nearly enough.
Well, he did the best he could, and he was my
Right.
teacher. Like I totally, like I have such compassion for both of them now.
Mhm.
All of them, even my sister. Like I have such deep compassion to say, wow, thank you for being the teacher. So
Yeah.
it's the stories that are created from our younger selves that's continuing in our body now to repeat it as our older self. And so
Mhm.
help people go back and reshape their stories. They're reshaping it, not me. Like
Mhm.
no one is a healer of anyone else.
Yes. You mean your clients or your retreat attendees, they're the ones reshaping it. Yeah.
Yes, the
Yes.
clients are reshaping their own. And by the way, I'm stepping into it, or they're stepping into it. They're healing 7 generations back and 7 generations forward.
Mm.
So the pattern stops here.
Mm.
Another example is 3 generations we lost our only sons suddenly and unexpectedly. My grandmother's son was taken away when he was born because it was out of wedlock. Couldn't tell anybody. She never mentioned it until I was a teenager, and he showed up saying, I'm your uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or your
Yeah.
son, or whatever. My mom's son, when she was pregnant for me, died of SIDS.
Mhm.
My son died by suicide.
Yeah.
So for 3 generations, that was the way it was. I
Mhm.
got to heal that. I got to break that cycle because I actually experienced the sorrow that was being held by all of the moms in this
Mhm. Yeah.
that I was holding in my body from
Yeah.
them.
I feel that what that's bringing up for me is that I sometimes think of like, if we don't handle stuff now, we're probably just going to come back and have to deal with it again.
Yeah, let me tell you,
I
if
mean,
you
spiritually, I know some people really don't believe or buy into reincarnation, but to me, it seems like in the infinity of time, a
yeah,
100 years or less seems like a really, really short time for a spirit to
yeah.
experience life. So
Well, let
yeah,
me tell you, if you're on the other side and you decide to say, hey, I want to clear all ancestral pain in one life, don't do it.
yeah,
It's a lot in one
it's
life.
a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. And
Yeah,
it's not worth it.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Oh
and to
my
see my
goodness.
daughter change, my daughter has grown tremendously just from the work that I've done, because the way I respond to her is
Yes,
different than how I responded to her in the past. We have
yes,
the best relationship now that we're like best friends,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. What would you say, Kathleen, what do you think that is like the most important thing that you want to share with people that you feel like they need to know or remember about doing the work they're called to do in the world in ways that work.
Step into your own healing journey. Step into your journey, question, be curious, be in flow even when it doesn't feel well. Like I was talking about my identity being compromised. I'm like, be in flow. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
And to explore where you're telling yourselves the untruths. And the untruths are anything that makes you feel bad, that's an untruth. Anything that makes you feel less than, anything that makes you feel irritated, full of anxiety or depression, it's not true. It's not true. And there's a way to work through it. So step into it. It takes courage. It takes a willingness to do it. And I can promise you, the freedom you feel from it is beyond any words that I can explain. Like, there's a freedom there.
Absolutely. Something I think every one of our listeners can benefit from. Thank you so much. If you would like to learn more about Cathleen, please visit her website at CathleenElle.com. That's Kathleen with a C, CATHLEEN, and then the last word L is ELLE.com. Or to schedule a free discovery call, you can email her at Kathleen@KathleenElle.com. We'll also drop a link in the show notes for a free discovery call that she's sharing with our listeners and our viewers today. So if you'd like to have a 30-minute session with Cathleen, she often is able to help people find some relief and some direction just from that 30-minute call. So feel free to set that up again. That'll be linked in the show notes. Kathleen, thank you again so much for sharing yourself and your whole heart and soul with us. Your heart and your strength and what you do, the work for others, I think is just so needed in the world. And I'm so grateful to have you out there doing it.
Thank you, Spencer, for doing what you're doing and transforming millions of people's lives just by interviewing the people that you have, and for stepping into your journey the way you have as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. If you'd like to learn more about how you can unleash your and your organization's power to profitably and sustainably make the full impact that you know you're here to make, and to do it in ways that work for you without life-sucking consequences, go to transformingmillions.com to sign up for our free masterclass and to be among the first to know about our live coaching and connection event coming soon. See you next time.